Welcome to Part 5 of The Music of Murder. Visit brooksaudiobooks.com for an awesome collection of unique, full-length audiobooks. And be sure to subscribe to be notified when new books are released. Chapter 17. Marcus' raw emotions were finally calming down. After he dug an old oil lamp out of the closet and lit it, he settled in for a pipe and a conversation. However, the shock had disoriented him so much that he couldn't focus on the case, so he left early for the firehouse. McCarty had carefully positioned himself between his visitor and the grim scene in the fireplace, and as soon as the visitor departed, he removed the deadly items and locked them in his bedroom closet under a pile of old boots, along with the revolver. On inspection, he noticed it was a replica of his old service weapon. How could his would-be attacker have gotten a police positive, a .38 specially made for the department? While he contemplated this, the telephone rang, and Jimmy Ballard's voice came through the line. "Hey, Ty, do you know what that was you gave me today? A silver leaf." "It looked kind of like a leaf and had a silvery sheen to it, Jimmy, but I thought it was just some flat plush," McCarty replied. "I still don't understand. What is it really?" "It's a leaf from an African silver tree, a species that grows abundantly on Table Mountain, just behind Cape Town. No telling how old it is, since they last forever if not handled too much. Where did you find it, and what does it have to do with that little situation we discussed this morning?" "Nothing at all," McCarty insisted quickly. "Just something I picked up. I'd appreciate it if you could wrap it up and send it to me special delivery, though." "Sure thing," Jimmy laughed. "Of course, it's not important when you need it sent special, and you were ready to trade your best lead of the year for information about it. Just give me the scoop before the other guys catch wind of it, and I won't ask any more questions. Did you see our extra?" McCarty cut Jimmy's youthful enthusiasm short. He had to face away from the door to talk on the phone, and he had no idea when his mysterious visitor might return. Remarkably, that gunshot hadn't stirred the neighborhood, likely because of the howling wind and lashing rain. Would the person behind this little surprise have the presence of mind to stay away and wait to see if the morning papers reported the potential tragedy? He would, if he were indeed the same wretched soul who had unleashed all that terror in the mall, and McCarty was morally certain of that. He had told Marcus and the inspector that they could only hope to unravel the mystery by outsmarting him and predicting who his next target would be. Now he smirked to himself. Little did he know back then who it would turn out to be. But tonight's events made one thing clear. The man was afraid. He was starting to show signs of weakness. His defenses were crumbling, and his nerve was slipping. The reckless choice he made to risk being caught in his act, coupled with the complexity of his plan, revealed the frantic effort he was making in a state of guilty panic to eliminate someone who represented the law. Yet the mind that had devised and executed two such bizarre crimes as the murders, not to mention the abduction of the child Nathan, would surely be more than capable of handling the current predicament. Having learned from his initial failure, he would be doubly cautious and alert. McCarty had drawn his fire, and it was likely that there would be a pause in the crimes at the mall, while the culprit focused on those who threatened to unravel his horrific schemes. The storm raged even more violently as the hour grew late, and for more than one reason, McCarty was hesitant to step outside for the dinner he had forgotten. He discovered a worn-out percolator, some canned meat, and crackers, preparing a simple meal before finally heading to bed with his revolver tucked beneath the pillow. Upon waking, he found that a gloomy day had arrived. For a while, he lay there listening to the wind howling down the chimney and the rain lashing against the windows as he formulated a plan. He needed to work alone since Max would be on duty for the next 24 hours, which he actually found reassuring. If there were any further attempts on his life, he couldn't risk Max being caught in the crossfire. It would be just his luck to walk directly into a trap meant for him. As for McCarty, he intended to give his enemy every chance to try again. He shaved and dressed, feeling the familiar thrill of the chase pumping through his veins like in the old days. Yet now he found himself in the unusual position of being the hunted rather than the hunter. In an instant, he had swapped places with the notorious murderer and child stealer, and the thought added a new layer of excitement to his predicament. He was leaving for his usual restaurant when the phone rang, pausing briefly before picking up the receiver. His visitor from the night before might have already read in the papers that his attempt had failed. But what if he was calling to confirm that the event hadn't actually happened and remained undiscovered? Would he give himself away by being startled to hear the voice of his intended victim? McCarty lifted the receiver, hesitated for a moment, and then responded in a sudden, cheerful tone. "Hello. Am I speaking with former roundsman McCarty?" The voice that came through was older and very formal, and when McCarty replied affirmatively, he realized he had never heard it before. "Inspector Lucien suggested that I call and request a meeting with you regarding a strictly confidential matter, Mr. McCarty." "This is Benjamin Webster from number 7, New Queen's Mall," he said, his voice crisp and devoid of emotion. "Can you tell me when you'll be available to meet with me?" "In 1 hour, Mr. Webster," McCarty replied without hesitation. "Is this about what happened the night before last?" "Yes," the single word came out sharp and decisive. "In an hour, Mr. McCarty." He heard the receiver click as McCarty hung up, leaving him with a furrowed brow. Did the inspector suspect Webster's burglar, and was he trying to pass the responsibility? As he stepped outside, he noticed an envelope pushed partly under his door, stamped with a special delivery mark. Jimmy Ballard had kept his promise and returned the silver leaf. He tucked it into his pocket and headed out into the pouring rain, though his thoughts soon shifted to the Italian newsvendor on the corner, a familiar face after many years. "Back at it again," the vendor's white teeth flashed in his dark face. "This paper says you're gonna catch the guy who murdered that French girl." It was the bulletin, and Jimmy Ballard's idea of a joke was to announce the rumor that former roundsman Timothy McCarty, known for his unique and notable achievements in the department, had been reassigned to the Detective Bureau for a special investigation related to the crime wave in New Queen's Mall, and that significant developments might be expected soon. McCarty dismissed it with a grunt. His attention was suddenly caught by a short paragraph further down the page, prompting him to stop and ignore the rain trickling down his neck from his tilted umbrella. The article bluntly stated that George Radley, the poisoner who had escaped from Sing Sing a month earlier, had been found wandering in a disturbing state of madness on the Upper East Side, and would likely be committed to Matiwan. Efforts were underway to trace the clothing he had worn in search of possible accomplices in his escape. With a nod to the newsvendor, McCarty hurried on at last. While waiting for his order at the small restaurant, he fell into deep thought. Was that why Webster had summoned him? Had he discovered that the escaped prisoner had received help from under his roof? He ate quickly and then rushed to the New Queen's Mall, where just inside the gate he bumped into Inspector Lucien. "You've heard from Webster?" Lucien asked. McCarty nodded. "He said you told him to send for me. What's it about, sir?" His tone was innocently curious. "What can I tell the old gentleman about his missing papers?" "It's what he'll tell you, if you can get it out of him. I can't," his superior admitted. "He's definitely hiding something, and if he weren't such a well-known figure, I'd suspect he knows more about that robbery than he's letting on. The other person who was holding out on us came forward last night, but it's not going to help much, except to rule out one more possibility." "Who was it?" McCarty pressed. "Eustace Ellison. The only thing keeping him and his wife going over the past 3 days since the boy went missing was their private fear that he'd been kidnapped for ransom and would be held safely until the exchange could be made. But now that hope is gone. The man they suspected of taking Nathan was a former business associate of Ellison, now down on his luck. It seems he asked Ellison for financial help at a time when it would have saved him, and when Ellison refused, he threatened to make him pay dearly if he took the most precious thing he had. Since the trouble started, Ellison has been quietly searching for him, expecting him to make a demand for a large sum. That's why he was willing to offer such a hefty reward." Last night, though, he finally tracked him down and discovered that the poor guy had been sick in a sanitarium for months and had no idea what happened with Nathan. Mrs. Ellison is nearly losing her mind, Allonby is looking after her, and Ellison himself is in pretty bad shape, but I can only keep giving him the same empty reassurances. Look over there. That's the boy's police dog, Max. They say he's grieving himself to death. Tie, if we don't act soon. We're going to hold our ground and wait for the other guy to show his hand, the one behind all these murders and chaos. As they walked down the block toward the Webster house, McCarty glanced across the street to the small courtyard by the Goddards. The slender, sleek police dog was pacing restlessly back and forth, moving like a caged animal, his head low and his tail hanging down. The inspector followed his companion's gaze. Camden told me he tried to get Max to go for a walk, but the dog won't go more than a few steps from the house. They're one-person animals, that breed, and the boy was everything to him. If you manage to get any solid information from the old gentleman, call me at the medical examiner's office. He continued on, and McCarty climbed the steps of the Webster residence and rang the bell. After a brief wait, a young man appeared, moving with awkward grace in his page's uniform. His bright but somewhat weak face looked unusually pale, and his sharp eyes darted around nervously. "I'm McCarty," the newcomer stated shortly. "Mr. Webster is expecting me." "Yes, sir." The young man's voice was almost servile. "You can head right back to his study, sir. I'll show you." He led McCarty to the room he had already sneaked a visit to 2 nights before, and knocked on the door. "Come in." The same dignified, elderly voice that had answered the phone greeted them, and a man rose slowly from behind the desk as they entered. He was tall and powerfully built, with a sharp, intelligent face softened by warm grey eyes and a well-shaped mouth, sensitive yet firm. His finely chiseled features were framed by a shock of snowy white hair that hung long like a mane, and his old-fashioned, high stock and sharply tailored black coat made him look like a figure from another time. To McCarty, it seemed as though the man had stepped out of one of the portraits in his gallery, but there was nothing posed about him. He silently exuded authority, and McCarty felt almost embarrassed in his presence. What would the old gentleman think if he knew that the actual burglar stood right before him? McCarty could feel his honest face flush, yet he held his chin a fraction higher. After all, Webster was well versed in fluorine gas and powdered Tunis beans. He had a crew of criminals in his home, and was fully aware of it, and when his notes had gone missing, he hadn't exactly been eager to come clean. "Lieutenant McCarty, sir." The elevation in rank was clearly flattery, and McCarty's eyes sparkled as Benjamin Webster bowed. "That will suffice, Danny, Mr. McCarty," he added as the page boy withdrew. "I've asked you here because your inspector is tied up with more pressing issues in the little community on the Mall. From your call this morning, I take it you were made aware of the incident that occurred here Wednesday night." "Yes, Mr. Webster," McCarty replied. "Your house was entered through the rear window, wasn't it? And some papers were taken." "I heard that someone cut the wires outside and smashed a window," he said, his tone calm but urgent. "I also had an interior alarm system that was cleverly disabled so it wouldn't alert me in my bedroom. But please take a seat." He gestured toward a chair, and McCarty sat down without hesitation. In the grand scheme of things, the identity of the intruder matters little, as he wasn't just another petty thief. Valuable items were practically within reach: gold and silver plates, ivories, bronzes, and ceramics, all of which would have been a treasure to a typical burglar. But those remained untouched, while he searched for documents that offered him no financial gain. Mr. Webster's gaze remained fixed on McCarty, an intense look that made him feel uneasy. He cleared his throat, trying to shake off the discomfort. "The inspector mentioned that some notes for a book were missing, along with some personal papers," he said hesitantly. "Those papers belong to others besides myself, I regret to say," Mr. Webster replied, shaking his head. "That's why I initially hesitated to go into detail. But after reporting the incident to the authorities, I've made another discovery that leaves me with no choice. The personal documents taken from this filing cabinet relate to the troubled pasts of several people I consider friends. It would be deeply unfair to make their stories public, especially to let such private records fall into the wrong hands. While the manuscript of my book may seem a small loss to the world, it represents years of careful thought and research. I intended it as a message, an appeal for global peace, detailing the horrors of the last war, including the methods humanity used to wreak havoc on one another. I mention this because one of the weapons I described was fluorine gas, and the formula was included. Fluorine gas had been mentioned in the papers in connection with the tragic death of the young nurse across the street, but it didn't dawn on me until last night when I made another discovery. What was it? McCarty felt compelled to ask, despite knowing what was about to come. Was the old gentleman truly as noble as he seemed, or was he just as clever as they come, playing it safe? He could hardly blame himself for his suspicious thoughts, especially since Webster referred to the crooks as his friends and seemed intent on protecting them. What could it all mean? When your inspector visited me last week to ask some questions, I learned about the manservant from the same household as the young girl who had died. He had also passed away. The inspector mentioned the poison thought to have been used, physostigmine. Tunis bean, McCarty replied, nodding. Precisely. I had never heard of it, so I looked it up in some reference books I keep, books found in any home with a modicum of intellectual curiosity. Unfortunately, I was called away before I finished reading the article and marked the page. That page, Mr. McCarty, has been torn from my encyclopedia, and I can only surmise that this occurred on Wednesday evening. His gentle yet commanding voice continued in a steady, controlled tone, and McCarty looked down at the floor, feeling the urge to lift his eyes again. If only the old gentleman would just look away for a moment. It seems a strange sort of burglar who would tear a page out of a book he could find anywhere, and considering that it was an article about Tunis bean, along with the notes on fluorine gas also missing. The words caught in McCarty's throat, but he pushed himself to continue. Why would he take just those from here when both poisons were used in the crime? And how did he even know where to find them? I have been pondering those questions myself, but I have no answers. I truly believe that those two coincidences are more than random chance, and it's my responsibility to report them. Yes, I understand. McCarty shifted his weight awkwardly. Mr. Webster, what's happened to your butler, Chris Porter, Roberts, as he went by here? He asked the question pointedly, but the grey eyes remained steady. You were aware of his true identity. The record of his troubles was among the documents taken from my filing case. I recognized him, and he confessed something to me the other day. McCarty met his gaze with renewed interest, noting that Mr. Webster flinched slightly, a faint blush rising in his otherwise pale complexion. A confession. Christopher was a broken man, victimized in a way that would be unjust even if he had been guilty of the crime he was imprisoned for. I am absolutely convinced of his innocence, he declared passionately. A serious miscarriage of justice has occurred. I cannot give him back the years our penal system has stolen from him, but I was working to help him recover his mental and moral strength to regain his self-respect. Mr. McCarty, if Christopher made any confession, it must have been forced out of him. Whether innocent or guilty, he has already paid the penalty imposed by the state. True, for his involvement in that poisoning case, if that's what you're referring to, but it wasn't that he confessed. Mr. Webster, I want to ask you something. McCarty leaned in closer. If someone, let's say a man, was sentenced and then managed to escape, and you believed he was innocent, would you think it was your duty to protect him or to turn him into the authorities again? I would turn him over to the authorities. The reply came without a moment's hesitation. One's personal views cannot take precedence over the commandments of our laws, or else our entire social order would have crumbled centuries ago. The individual must be immersed in the collective for civilization to survive. But why do you ask? You realize that Radley, the man sentenced alongside Porter, escaped a month ago and was caught last night. I knew he had escaped, but I hadn't heard he was recaptured, Mr. Webster exclaimed, his voice carrying an unusual shock. The newspapers must have mentioned it, but I was too troubled this morning to check. Where was the unfortunate man found? Not where he was last Sunday, Mr. Webster, McCarty shot back with emphasis. He's thought to be mad now, so he'll be sent to the asylum instead of back up the river. But he wasn't mad last Sunday, nor in the week prior when he was hiding in the empty house next door, living off your meals and being cared for by someone in your home. That was in Porter's confession, and I'm asking you, where is he now? He has left. Webster leaned on his desk, shielding his eyes with his hand. I never suspected this. Christopher set the breakfast table as usual this morning and arranged the mail and newspapers. It must have been then that he saw the news about Radley's capture and fled in a panic, fearing he might be arrested again. I had thought he seemed more troubled this week. If he had only come to me and let me persuade him of his higher duty. I have failed him, failed. His voice trembled with deep concern, but McCarty pressed on, calmly. Perhaps, sir. Did he leave around the time the papers arrived? That would be around 8 o'clock. Was it before or after you called me to let me know? Mr. Webster's hand dropped, defeated. Just before. I had no reason to suspect his departure, and he left no message, but the state of his room indicated a hasty exit. It was in that moment that I resolved to trust you completely. Is it because of the missing information about fluorine gas and the Tunis bean, along with his previous record? McCarty insisted. He's already been convicted of poisoning. Enough, Mr. Webster stood up. Christopher was innocent of that past accusation, just as he is innocent of the crimes that have occurred this week. He may have been misguided in his sense of duty, but he is no murderer. Chapter 18. McCarty stepped out of the Webster house a few minutes later, his thoughts a whirlwind of conflicting impressions. The resonant, dignified tones of Benjamin Webster still echoed in his ears, and the man's deeply concerned gaze seemed to linger on him. Webster appeared to embody rectitude and righteousness, but was he truly as certain of Porter's innocence as he claimed? And did he genuinely not know where Porter had gone? Crossing the street to Orbitt's house, he glanced again into the courtyard between that and Ellison. Max was still there, but had lain down as if utterly drained, his ribs glistening in the rain and looking painfully thin. Why didn't anyone take the poor creature in? McCarty paused and spoke softly to him. The dog slowly turned his dull eyes in McCarty's direction, but did not respond otherwise. For a long moment, McCarty regarded the dog thoughtfully, and when he finally continued on his way, there was an absent look in his eyes. Wei Anya greeted him and led him to the library where he had first arrived. A small fire smouldered on the hearth, fueled by some strange, peat-like substance, casting iridescent flames and a faint, sweet scent reminiscent of sandalwood. Before the fire sat Orbit, accompanied by a stout, florid man dressed in tweeds. "Good morning, McCarty. I was expecting either you or the inspector to check on me this morning," Orbit said, turning to his guest. "Sir Victor, this is Deputy McCarty, the officer collaborating with Inspector Lucien on the investigation into this dreadful mystery." Sir Victor de Veru nodded cordially to the former roundsman. "Truly shocking this, shocking," he exclaimed. "Here for a little private chat with Mr. Orbit, am I? I'll take my leave." "No, please don't go, Sir Victor." Orbit waved him off with a smile. "You're aware of all the circumstances, and McCarty and I have nothing private to discuss. I hope he has some news for me. Have you heard about what happened to me the other night?" "I did," McCarty nodded. "What do you think it was all about if nothing was taken?" "I haven't a clue. Come sit by the fire, you're drenched," Orbit said kindly. "I'll have Wei Anya bring you a drink from my private stash." "No, thank you, Mr. Orbit. I get the gout every now and then, though you might not believe it," McCarty replied, with a hint of pretense. "I just stopped by to see if you had thought of anything else to tell the inspector about the chloroforming." "Nothing. Everything happened so fast, and my memories are quite unclear. I'm afraid I won't be much help to you. One thing is certain. The man didn't mean for me to die from it since he took the time to open the windows and toss away the cloth he used to put me under," Orbit shrugged. "The whole incident is completely baffling unless we assume he just meant to frighten me, which is frankly too ridiculous to consider. It was an outrage, Sir Victor exclaimed suddenly. By God, it's unbelievable. The guy must be a monster or insane. What could he possibly gain by trying to kill Griffith? That valet was something else. And what about the girl? This theory about poison gas strikes me as nonsense. It's utterly impossible with you in the room, but the girl is dead, isn't she? There you have it. He leaned back in his chair, puffing thoughtfully on his cigar. His host glanced at McCarty, a slight hint of amusement in his eyes, though that quickly faded back into sorrow. The girl is dead, poor thing, and I can't help but feel that I bear some responsibility since I invited her in. No matter how her death came about, at least the child survived. We can be thankful for that. None of us feel safe here on the Mall, while the murderer roams freely, entering our homes at will and killing without fear whenever that terrible urge strikes him. I hesitated to extend my hospitality to Sir Victor given these distressing circumstances, but he insisted he could handle the risk. Tough break, the baronet nodded. I'm sorry I'm leaving tomorrow. I'd much rather stick around and see this through. Heard the old chap across the way was robbed the same night. Any leads on that, McCarty? There was no sarcasm in his tone, but McCarty's face flushed darkly. Then a quick glance at the questioner brought a slow smile to his face. The Britisher was clearly trying to goad him. Yes, sir, just like here, he replied. Mr. Orbit, do you still have that chloroform bottle? The inspector mentioned it was found on a stand by your bed. I believe Wei Anya has it. Would you like to see it? He rang the bell without waiting for a response. The cloth used was a towel from my own bathroom. It's clear the intruder was familiar with the house and knew his way around. But how he got in through that side door leading from the card room, if Wei Anya really bolted it as usual the night before. Oh, Wei Anya. The butler appeared silently in the doorway, and Orbit spoke to him in quick Chinese. Wei Anya, expressionless and stoic as ever, bowed and left the room, and McCarty turned back to Orbit. What time did you reckon you were drugged? I'd say around 2 a.m., maybe a little before that. Sir Victor and I stayed up past midnight playing chess, and when I went to bed, I struggled for over an hour to fall asleep before I finally took a bromide. Things became a blur after that, and I lost track of how long I dozed before I became aware of someone in the room. Did you catch any hint of anything before the chloroform knocked you out? McCarty inquired. No scent of a pipe or cigar if the person happened to be a smoker. I smoke so often myself that I likely wouldn't have noticed it even if there had been time and I was fully awake. Orbit raised his eyebrows. You smoke too, McCarty. Would you have picked up on it? Of course, McCarty replied modestly. I may not have Max's keen sense of smell, but it's pretty easy to tell the difference between a cigar and a pipe, even if it's just lingering on someone's clothes. A rich, full-bodied cigar leaves a scent that can follow a man around, whether he has it for himself or not. Max, Orbit echoed. Oh, you mean your partner, Riordan. Yes, I remember he picked up on the smell of that small fire here a week ago when the monkey knocked over the cigar lighter in my room. Quite a curious talent, isn't it, Sir Victor? Delightful, I think. I only wish I had it, Sir Victor chuckled. My servant helps himself to my cigars at an alarming rate, but I can never catch him at it. I say, no one has disturbed our game, have they? Not at all, Orbit answered. I gave strict instructions, and we can finish the match tonight. Sir Victor held the amateur chess championship for Great Britain for 5 years. He shared this with McCarty, then turned as Wei Anya returned and spoke to him once again in his native language. The butler stepped forward and handed McCarty the bottle he had seen in Orbit's room 2 nights ago. Do you know if it has been uncorked since it was found beside you? McCarty examined the contents closely, removed the cork himself, and took a cautious sniff. Hurriedly putting the bottle back, he passed it to Wei Anya and stood up. I don't think so, Orbit said as he pulled out his handkerchief and pressed it to his nose. I'm sensitive to that smell, especially since Wednesday night. Sorry, I can't be more help. I'll rely on you and the inspector to keep me updated on any changes. As McCarty trudged through the pounding rain toward the east gate again, he shook his head. By nightfall, it would be a week since Griffith had been murdered, and the situation was still unclear. He headed to the lunchroom on 3rd Avenue where he and Marcus had eaten before, and out of habit ordered fried oysters. They took a long time to arrive, and he rested his elbows heavily on the table. Was he getting too old for this work after all? Back when he was active, he would have uncovered the truth by now. It had been a tough life in more ways than one, yet he regretted leaving it and growing rusty. Suddenly, he straightened in his chair, staring at the cynical sign that read, "Watch your hat and coat," on the wall in front of him, as if it were entirely new to him. The waitress's delayed arrival with the oysters jolted him back to reality, and he quickly got to his feet. "Don't want them," he muttered gruffly. "Just give me the check, I've got to go." He flung a dime onto the table, grabbed the receipt, settled his tab at the cashier's desk, and stepped out as if in a daze. Once around the corner, he felt a surge of energy and walked briskly toward the subway. 20 minutes later, he arrived at headquarters, and after a lengthy meeting with the chief of the detective bureau, left with some credentials for the main office of the telephone company. He spent what felt like a long, unproductive hour reviewing the calls from the Gotham Exchange, which included the new Queen's Mall from the previous Tuesday. Numerous messages had come through on Ellison's private line before Camden had contacted Blaisdell's studio. By late afternoon, Nathan's ongoing absence had raised concerns, and there were at least 20 numbers logged before Ellison had finally called McCarty. Orbit's phone had also been busy, ringing with the caterer, decorator, florist, and a music agency regarding the afternoon's event. There were 3 messages to the coal dealer, and many others that seemed to have been sent by guests long into the evening. In contrast, only 4 calls had come from the Thorne residence, which appeared to have been made by the lady herself, as they were directed to her dressmaker, hairdresser, perfumer, and a well-known department store. Webster's phone had been connected to a foreign consulate, several charitable organizations, and a banking house, while the Renee household had reached out to Dr. Allenby, a pharmacy, a male nursing agency, the office number of a prominent financier, and several residences of other notable figures. McCarty copied down 1 or 2 numbers from each list and set out to verify them, but even though the afternoon dragged on, twilight had not yet arrived when he returned to his rooms and entered carefully. Fortunately, nothing had been disturbed this time, but he lingered just long enough to grab the page he had torn from the encyclopedia before slipping back out into the pouring rain toward the firehouse that housed Engine Company 23. Inside, Marcus was busy matching nickels with Mike in the dormitory and was winning quite a bit, but he quickly promised the loser a chance for revenge later and slid down the pole to catch up with McCarty. "I've been searching for you all afternoon," he exclaimed, sounding a bit reproachful, then added, "You have news. I can see it in your eyes, and I should have known something would happen while I was out of the loop." "Nothing new here," McCarty replied quietly. "I have a strange feeling in my gut, but it's too unsettling to voice just yet until I have something to support it. Webster called me this morning, himself, the old gentleman, and told me the truth about what went missing since Wednesday night, which wasn't exactly a surprise. He mentioned how clever it was that you disconnected the inside alarm system." "Me," Marcus exclaimed, his weathered face going pale. "This is what I get for letting you lead me into breaking the law. Now I'll get booted out of the department and arrested, and Marley will change the baby's name." "Oh, Webster didn't know it was you, Max. He just said it had been done cleverly," McCarty quickly clarified. "I brought up Porter and Radley and asked him what he would do if he found out someone innocent escaped and came to him for help. He was quick to say he'd hand him over to the authorities anyway. It was his higher duty to uphold our social fabric, whatever that means." "Really?" Marcus scoffed, clearly unimpressed. "The social fabric could burn for all I care. I'd stand by a friend, innocent or not. But I don't have his lofty, cold-blooded ideals. You know that poor guy, been caught right. Crazier than a loon." McCarty nodded. "Porter knows it too. He's on the run, scared he'll get sent up for hiding him." He pulled out a torn page from his pocket. There's more about the Tunis bean that I didn't share with you, Max, so I brought it along. Maybe it'll give us some insight. Listen to this. Tunis bean, ordeal nut. The seed of Physostigma venenosum, a twining, half-shrubby plant from Africa. What about it? Marcus said, clearly uninterested. How is that supposed to help us? Just give me a moment. The kernel is hard and white and releases its properties into alcohol and to a lesser extent into water. I bet it does, or they wouldn't have been able to knock back Griffith, given what we've heard about his habits, Marcus interjected, his curiosity piqued once more. There you have it, Ty. Track down the last person he drank with, and you'll uncover the one who offed him. That's not all, McCarty continued. The beans are reddish, grey, or, never mind the details. Care should be taken to avoid spontaneous. Did you really wade through all this rain just to give me a lesson in botany? Marcus retorted, indignantly. You won't find any truth in books. I was so rattled last night with that gunshot and everything that I forgot to ask you. What did the old guy you know uptown have to say about that busted blue balloon? Was he able to tell from the way it was decaying before our eyes what kind of gas was in it? McCarty paused, then said slowly, Max, remember the other night after we examined it? I put it in a cracker box while we stepped out to grab a bite, and when we came back, you saw me searching for something. You were trying to whistle too, Marcus nodded. That always means you think you're onto something. What was it? I was looking for that cracker box. I knew the moment we walked back in that someone had been in here, because I caught a stale smell of a strong cigar in the air. Nothing like he'd been smoking just then, but it was clearly lingering. When I found the box gone, I understood why he had come. Think of that. Do you realize what this means, Ty? The murderer knew that you, not the medical examiner's assistant, had taken it from the conservatory. I can only wonder if he followed us from that moment onward. The sight of us parading through the streets with all those balloons would have been a clear sign to him that we were up to something, if he wasn't blind. Marcus grinned. Let the medical examiner figure out what kind of gas it was. We already know how it was given to her, but we don't know what caused the balloon to burst right in her face, or how the gas ended up inside. I suspect it wasn't intended to kill Isolde at all. Not intended to kill her, exclaimed McCarty. The first whiff must have knocked her out cold. But what if it was meant for the baby and not for her? Marcus lowered his voice. What if the murderer has a thing for killing children? I've heard stories of this kind of madness, and so have you. What if Griffith was poisoned by mistake, meant for Way Anya, so that little Ling Sunny would be left unprotected? Then Nathan was taken away and perhaps murdered, and the Thorn baby was next on the list. Max, you're getting carried away, McCarty interrupted him. The murderer's mind is twisted, but he's not that insane. Baby killers are just senseless animals, lacking the cunning or knowledge to plan the kinds of crimes we're dealing with now. We're up against a calculating mind, not just a brute with a knife or a club. That's what you keep saying, Marcus shot back, clearly frustrated. That's what comes from reading all those books, while you've been analyzing his ancestry and the blood that runs through him to determine whether he belongs in the born or habit class, like your diagnostic book suggests. He's been enjoying a crime spree in the mall, kidnapping and killing left and right. It's going to be a week from tonight. McCarty quickly turned away and headed off to the restaurant, where he enjoyed a hearty dinner to make up for his missed lunch. Afterward, he returned to the mall, prowling about like a restless, somewhat too tangible ghost. The rain had finally let up, and although the sky remained partly cloudy, a few stars twinkled, hinting at a clear dawn ahead. The lights were still shining brightly in the Renee, Webster, and Orbit houses, but dim in Ellison's and Mrs. Thorne's, where she had been in a state of hysteria since the tragic murder of her baby's nurse. Yast had been reassigned from his duties at the mortuary to fill in for the night watchman, and McCarty paced alongside him for over an hour, discussing the unsettling series of events. Suddenly, as they walked past the courtyard next to the Ellison home, McCarty heard a soft, coaxing voice belonging to a man. He turned to see Camden bent over something hidden in the shadows. Come on, buddy, the tutor urged. Come inside like a good boy. Nathan isn't here, Max. There's no point in waiting. That's one sad dog for sure, Camden, McCarty commented. Startled, Camden looked up. He's grieving himself sick, he replied. He hasn't touched food since Tuesday, despite our efforts with all kinds of treats, and he's so weak he can barely stand. But he stays out here, waiting for Nathan to come home. I've got to get him inside, even if I have to carry him. At that moment, Max slowly got to his feet and started sniffing at McCarty's boots, whining softly. It's as if he's trying to communicate, McCarty exclaimed. I wish he could, if he knows anything, Camden said, his voice somber. If Nathan isn't found soon, his mother will go mad. McCarty, can't you do anything? Knowing the worst would be better than this dreadful uncertainty. The boy's disappearance is just a part of the trouble we're dealing with, Camden, McCarty reminded him. We're doing everything we can to find him. Soon, perhaps tomorrow, we'll take a big risk. He watched as the tutor led the dog into the house. Shaking his head, he continued on to the Orbit residence and rang the bell. It was little Ling, resplendent in his embroidered serving jacket, who opened the door and, without announcing him, gestured for McCarty to follow. He led the way to the library, the scene of their last meeting. The room sat in deep shadow, illuminated only by the glow from the fire and a single beam of light from a bridge lamp that shone down on a chessboard set up on a small table. Seated on opposite sides of the board were two figures, silent and focused, as still as statues. If they noticed McCarty's arrival, they showed no sign of it. Were they entranced or something? The pair couldn't possibly be asleep, sitting upright like that. McCarty waited a good 5 minutes, then cautiously stepped into the room, but still they seemed unaware of his presence. Orbit leaned forward, his eyes fixed on the board, hands clasped, elbows resting on the chair's arms, while the florid-faced Englishman appeared to be staring blankly ahead, lost in deep thought. Slowly, Orbit's right hand unhooked from the left, and he made a move on the board, his hand almost moving on autopilot to return to its previous position. A slight smile twitched at the corners of Sir Victor's mouth, and with a sharp intake of breath, he made a swift move, knocking off the gleaming white piece Orbit had just played. At this, Orbit lifted his head and looked up at the high, beamed ceiling. With that small motion, the silence broke, as a muffled, nearly inaudible sound escaped from Sir Victor's throat. Orbit made one last move, then glanced at his friend with an amused sympathy. Checkmate, Sir Victor. I promise I'll give you a chance for revenge in London next season. I say, that was quite clever. You led me right into a trap, didn't you? I wish some of the masters had been able to see that. Oh, there you are, McCarty. Are you a chess player by any chance? No, sir. McCarty took a step further into the room. Mister. Orbit, Ling Sunny brought me right in, and I waited so as not to interrupt you. That's fine, Orbit nodded with a friendly smile. Our game is finished. Do you have news for me? Sort of. Do you remember saying on Wednesday how grateful you were that the Thorn baby was old enough to talk? Yes, Orbit replied eagerly. I've tried a few times to see Mrs. Thorn and little Maud, but the mother is still overwhelmed from her child's close call and won't let the baby out of her sight for a second. She's too exhausted to meet with anyone, too. The little girl spoke to me the other day, McCarty revealed. She did. Why didn't you tell me? Orbit pushed his chair back and stood up. Did she mention anyone, hear anything? Please, this might be very important. His eyes lit up, and the excitement he felt seemed to infect his guest, for Sir Victor also stood up. No, sir. She knew no more than you or I, but she kept asking for her balloon. Apparently, Isolde had bought it for her from a vendor by the gate just before you invited them in. It was a blue one, the baby said, and she was quite persistent about it. But I don't recall seeing any toy balloon in that conservatory. Did you? No, Orbit shook his head. I honestly don't know. I wasn't paying close attention. But surely it couldn't have anything to do with the case. What is it, Ling Sunny? The little coffee boy spoke quickly in Chinese, and after a moment, Orbit turned with a gesture that included Sir Victor and McCarty. I need to take this call. Please excuse me." Once he left the room, the Englishman glanced back at the chessboard with the intense focus of an enthusiast. "It's a shame you didn't catch that move. Goodness, very clever. On the 21st move, his knight captured my pawn. Check. I moved the king to the queen's square. By Jove, he moved the queen to bishop 6th. Check. I captured his queen with my knight, and then Orbit slid his bishop to the 7th rank. Checkmate. Quite the clever move, I must say. Really, McCarty, he had put me in what is often referred to in chess as the immortal game." "Checkmate," McCarty echoed, taking his time. "So that means you're calling the shots, blocking every option, not securing any victory for yourself, but preventing your opponent from making any moves. It's a rather hollow victory, in my opinion, but still better than being completely wiped off the board. The key to it all, thinking ahead." Chapter 19. On Saturday morning, as McCarty opened his door to head to breakfast, he bumped into Marcus at the top of the stairs. "Is it that hard to watch where you're going?" Marcus said, shaking his head. "I've just come off duty without a bite to eat or even a shave, and now I'm nearly sent tumbling down the stairs." "Let's grab some food, then," McCarty replied. "You can get a shave afterward and meet me back here. I just got a call from the inspector, and he'll be by soon. He has something important to discuss." After they finished their meal, Marcus headed to his favorite barber, while McCarty returned to his rooms with the usual stack of newspapers under his arm. He paused in front of the half-open door of the antique shop. From an inner room at the back, he could hear the deep sounds of a cello playing a simple, yet oddly persistent little tune, which didn't quite seem right for such an instrument, until it blossomed into a sweeping arpeggio. Gerard must have finished organizing his stock, and was now indulging in his favorite pastime early in the morning. Still, McCarty lingered for a moment longer before pushing open the door and stepping inside. The music stopped, and the little old Frenchman peered curiously at him from behind the curtains. "Ah, it's you, my friend," he exclaimed as he approached with a smile. "Did you hear the cello? She's in a foul mood because I'm playing her some German music again, but it's enchanting, that bewitching song from Hansel and Gretel. I attend the performance every year." "Is that what you were playing?" McCarty asked politely. "Is it opera, then? I'm not very knowledgeable about them." "It's from a children's fairy tale," Monsieur Gerard explained. "The witch builds a gingerbread house in the woods to lure the little ones in, and when they touch it, they meet their doom. But tell me, you're back with the police, yes? Have you found the murderer of my countrywoman?" "I just stopped by to catch up, and to ask if you see that troublesome red-headed fellow, Jimmy Ballard, hanging around. Please let him know I've left town. He writes too freely for my liking," McCarty said, his tone sharp. But then he changed his demeanor. "Did you notice a man who came to see me the night before last, just around dusk? I missed him by just a few minutes." "Not at all, my friend." Gerard shook his head. "It rains so heavily that you can hardly see outside, and I close the shop while there's still light. You haven't come by in ages to spend an evening with the old man." His tone was filled with longing, and McCarty replied warmly, "Of course I'll come, just as soon as this case wraps up. Don't forget about Jimmy." After leaving the shop, he climbed the stairs to his apartment and sat down to read the papers. However, they offered little of interest. With the inspector still delayed, he pulled out his books again and became completely absorbed when Marcus returned, freshly shaven and neatly dressed, wearing a collar that was an inch too snug for his slender neck. "What's with the fancy get-up?" his host asked. "That collar, so tight it looks like it could pop off and hit someone." "Please, just let me be," Marcus replied, trying to maintain his dignity. "A man has a right to look sharp on a Saturday, and I see you're back to your books again. Where's the inspector?" "That's him ringing now." McCarty stood up. "Max, make sure to listen to what I tell him about Webster, but don't add anything extra. What he doesn't know will save us some time." "What are you?" Marcus began, but he didn't get the chance to finish his question. The inspector hurried up the stairs, taking them two at a time, and entered without knocking. "Sorry I'm late, Ty. Hello, Riordan, back on the job with us again." "The medical examiner," has received word from Washington. Washington, please have a seat. Are you referring to that poison gas? McCarty urged, motioning toward the large armchair. Did they determine its composition? Only as much as can ever be revealed. The inspector's expression was serious. I'm not sure if you remember this from a while back, but during the last months of the war, a report circulated from the capital about a new poison gas, more lethal than any previously known. Its formula was classified, a government secret. The newspapers were buzzing with it, and there were plans to equip our forces with it just when the armistice was declared. Since then, aside from those in charge, few have given it a second thought until our recent inquiries. Last night, Hinton Sherrard, who was responsible for safeguarding that folio of confidential documents, took his own life. The formula for the poison gas has vanished. Is that what the murderer used? Marcus exclaimed, wide-eyed. Did he steal it from the department? Theft would have been nearly impossible without inside knowledge, but the coded messages from Washington suggest Sherrard was entangled in some foreign financial scandal. He managed to extricate himself about 2 months ago by paying a hefty sum. The situation was only brought to the attention of the departmental heads when he committed suicide in the main dining room of the Wayland Hotel. Given that he apparently didn't have anywhere near the funds he supposedly paid, there's only one conclusion. He must have sold the formula for that gas. That must have cost a fortune, McCarty mused. Anyone living on the Mall could have afforded it if they were desperate enough, but 2 months ago, the murderer really planned ahead. Are you sure there's no mistake about this? If no one knows the formula. The chemist who created it is still alive, along with 3 other men in Washington who know its components. They all agree that the effects seen in Isolde, according to the autopsy, are identical to what this unidentified gas would produce, and nothing else in chemistry could have caused such a result. Here, why don't you try one of these instead, Ty? Old Mr. Webster gave them to me, and even though he doesn't smoke himself, they should be decent. He pulled out a handful of aromatic cigars from his pocket as McCarty held up a box from the mantel. The main concern for us regarding this situation is that Washington is in a frenzy and eager to capture our suspect and the formula before it slips away, possibly into the hands of a foreign power. Do you understand? Are you suggesting there might be another war? Precisely. They're sending in some hand-picked agents from the Secret Service to look into this, and you know what that means. The case will effectively be taken out of our hands. To the everlasting disgrace of the force, and because of us. McCarty shot to his feet and began to pace quickly. It's maddening, isn't it, Inspector? We've done everything humanly possible and faced obstacles at every turn, much like Sir Victor in last night's chess match against Orbit. It would be catastrophic if we fail now. You whoa! Marcus suddenly sat up, shaking ashes from his pipe onto the book resting on his knee. Don't mind him, sir. He has a plan. He practically told me so yesterday afternoon. Max! McCarty halted, grimacing at the base informant. Don't listen to him, Inspector. I had just a fleeting thought without any real evidence to support it, and if I revealed it now and it turned out to be completely wrong, there wouldn't be a place on this earth where we could hide from the fallout. What is it? The inspector insisted. For heaven's sake, Ty, don't hold back anything now. It's not just your record or my career that's on the line. The pride of the entire department rests in our hands. What do you mean by this notion, as you call it? McCarty shook his head. It's pointless, sir. If I had even a clue of circumstantial evidence to back it up, I wouldn't be just sitting here right now. But I assure you, by noon, I'll know if there's any truth to it. If there is, I'll be calling headquarters with a request that might surprise you. Whatever it is, I'll make sure I follow through, because you know I won't act unless I'm certain. His tone carried an unmistakable sense of determination, which Inspector Lucien acknowledged with a shrug. A flicker of renewed hope appeared in his troubled eyes. By noon, he repeated. I'll be waiting for your message, Ty. Meanwhile, McCarty deliberately avoided looking at Marcus. I have some news for you, sir. Max and I managed to get our hands on the papers that were missing from Webster's house. I knew you would. A slight smile flickered across the inspector's face. The department doesn't support burglary, of course, but when two capable deputies like you take matters into your own hands, I can't be held responsible. What did you find? Marcus tried to hide behind his book, but his pained expressions spoke volumes about his guilt. McCarty looked at his former superior with a look of disappointment. It's not what I expected from you, sir, after all these years, but we'll try to endure the injustice of it. The documents came to us discreetly, and since all Webster wants is to retrieve them, there's no harm done. Wait a minute. The inspector's mirth had vanished. Orbert's house was broken into that same night, and he was chloroformed. I swear on my life we had nothing to do with that. McCarty's serious tone was unmistakably sincere. I won't deny that I have my suspicions, but those thoughts came to me afterward, and they're part of this whole theory I have about the case. Anyway, let's get back to Webster. Perhaps you'd like to examine what was stolen from his filing cabinet during that outrageous robbery. It might explain why the housemaid and the page boy seemed so familiar to you. He handed the inspector the records of Webster's domestic staff and watched with a smirk as the inspector flipped through them quickly. Once the inspector's astonished comments faded, McCarty produced the manuscript notes but discreetly avoided mentioning the reference to fluorine gas or the torn leaf from the encyclopedia as he summarized his meeting with the eccentric philanthropist the day before. I left that conversation wondering if he was a crook, a crank, or a true saint, he concluded. What do you think of him? He might be a dreamer with plenty of grand ideas for making the world better, though they'll likely never come to fruition while we're still battling our inherent flaws. However, I believe he's a remarkable old character and deserving of his family, the inspector replied thoughtfully. The other day, I spoke with one of those psychoanalysts who set to lecture us at the commissioner's new school. He was familiar with them. Apparently, they're well known among genetic scholars as a prime example of what good blood looks like. There are countless people named Webster, I suppose, but I'm talking about the descendants of the first David Webster, and the old gentleman we know is the last in the direct male line. I know, McCarty said. They've produced 5 governors for the New England states, 8 clergymen in America, 14 foreign missionaries, 11 college professors, and 2 of them became college presidents. And I can't remember how many Army and Navy officers and other prominent figures. I've been looking them up a bit myself. Really, you have? The inspector blinked in surprise. Keeping up with the commissioner's latest trends, I see. Did you know that the Websters have been compared by these same experts on heredity to another family that's considered the worst on record? I have no access to that sort of information like those psychoanalysts do, McCarty admitted sheepishly. What about this other family? I can't recall the name, but they died out long ago. At least the male members did. They had every sort of crime and dishonesty among them, but were wasting time. I suppose you want me to return these papers to Webster with some excuse I can come up with. No, we have an hour before we can do anything, and Max and I thought we'd take them to him ourselves. McCarty stared into the ceiling, lost in the curling smoke. Max wants to have a little chat with him. Every day, Marcus finally set down his book. Every day, in every way, my friend Timothy McCarty is becoming a better and better liar. Max, what are you holding on to now? McCarty blushed deeply. One of your new textbooks, the other replied with a broad smile. It's by a foreign gentleman with a name like that of an Australian outlaw. I bought it by mistake, thinking it was about this psycho stuff too, because I couldn't make sense of it. McCarty slammed the desk drawer shut on the embarrassing book and turned to the inspector, who had risen to leave. You're heading out, sir. It might be slightly past noon when I give you a call, but you can be sure you'll hear from me one way or another. After the inspector left, the air was filled with mutual accusations that were somewhat heated, but they only served to clear the tension. Finally, McCarty spoke up. I pretty much revealed both our parts in breaking into the Webster house, but that was only after you told the inspector I was hiding something, which I wasn't, as I had nothing to hide. And about using science to catch criminals. I'm not dismissing it, Max, just because I haven't grasped it yet. Neither am I, Marcus chimed in. But to me, science is a lot like spontaneous combustion. If you don't handle it carefully, it builds up its own heat and eventually erupts into flames. What do you mean? McCarty paused, holding his hat halfway to his head. Spontaneous combustion, Marcus reiterated. It's when something generates its own heat, like hay in a barn, and remains enclosed for too long without airflow. It can ignite on its own. That was one of the first things I learned when I joined the department. McCarty chuckled. And that's your view of science, is it? Maybe it's as valid as any other. Now, let's go reassure the old gentleman about his stolen property. However, they were met with yet another delay. Once they entered the west gate of the mall, they ran into Mr. Gardner René. The pompous demeanor he usually wore had vanished, and he greeted them with unexpected warmth. What a dreadful week we've had, gentlemen, he declared. Setting aside the death of Orbert's valet, we've faced a murder, a kidnapping, and 2 robberies. It's a terrible record to consider. I trust you're doing everything possible to keep us safe here. Goodness, there's no telling where this chaos might strike next. Did you ever find your key to the gates? McCarty asked suddenly. Darn it, no. I had to get another one made, René complained. Let me think, I lost it about a week ago. I had used it Saturday morning to enter the east gate. I remember it clearly, and I must have dropped it near the Webster house. I trust you'll inform your inspector that I rely on him to keep a close watch over our home. My father had a serious turn on Tuesday, and if something like a burglary were to happen, it could be fatal. Did you manage to get a good nurse for him? McCarty asked with concern. The last one you had ran off, didn't he? Otto. Oh, he's back. He came on Tuesday afternoon, luckily. He may be a bit dim-witted, but he's a great caretaker, and my father is accustomed to him. You won't forget to ensure we're properly guarded, will you? McCarty reassured him warmly, and as they watched him head down toward the avenue with a spirited stride, Marcus commented, So Lindholm showed up again, and we didn't even think of it. On Tuesday, too, do you think? I'm done with thinking, McCarty interrupted. Let's stop by and find out. The René house, despite its almost overwhelming luxury, clearly revealed that a woman's touch had long been missing from its upkeep and arrangement. It had a cold, distant feel, as if the people living there were temporary residents with no real connection to the place. Marcus expressed his thoughts as the elderly butler hobbled away to fetch the nurse. It's like a hotel, he whispered. More grand than most, but still public. In the old days, I would have asked the old fellow where the café was. You're not accustomed to the high society we've been mingling with lately, Max, McCarty replied, just as soft but heavy footsteps echoed down the wide center staircase of the reception hall. Wish. Here comes the squarehead. The man who stepped through the door as soon as the words left the speaker's lips was a towering figure with blonde hair that stood upright, so light it was nearly colorless. His round face, flushed with health, was complemented by sleepy blue eyes. Hey there, it's Otto Lindholm. He cast a mildly curious look at them. Are you the same fellows who visit my wife? That's us, McCarty said with a friendly smile. Why did you run off? You had nothing to fear after your spat with Griffith. My woman, Otto shrugged, as if that explained everything. I told her we should stay, but she was anxious. You know how it is when you're married. Neither of us are, thank God, McCarty replied, relieved. You had that argument with Griffith last Thursday week, right? I warned him to stay away from my woman, or I'd handle it. He spoke with a sense of grim satisfaction. Next time he writes her a letter, I'll kick him around the street like a stray dog. That's all there is to it. His calm, clear eyes still regarded them with good humor, prompting McCarty to ask, When did you see him again? The next night, Friday. What? The brevity of Otto's answer was almost staggering. but he seemed unaware of its significance. "The next night," he repeated patiently. It was just starting to rain, and he was sitting on the stoop of a house 3 streets down, clutching his stomach with both hands. He looked very ill. I offered to take him home, but he told me to go to hell. He looked as pale as a sheet, and I thought he must be suffering a lot, but he insisted he would walk it off. That was the last time I saw him." "So you just left him there? That would have been around 8 o'clock. "Yes, about 8. I stayed to see if I could help, but he got up and walked away. I thought to myself that he looked like death, but I didn't guess it was poison. He told me he felt unwell during dinner, and I think he just ate too much." Otto shook his head. "Griffith was a bad man, but murder is something else entirely. That Tunis must be the one who came here to the mall for sure." Chapter 20. "Is that the poor creature you mentioned?" It was an hour later, and McCarty and Marcus were descending the steps of the Webster residence. Marcus pointed across the street, where Max was wandering back and forth in the courtyard. "Yes, he'll keep that up until he collapses." A somber tone had crept into McCarty's voice. "I wonder if Orbit went to see his friend off at the boat. I'd like to speak with him if Sir Victor has already left." "We've had our share of conversations this morning," Marcus replied. "We know just as much now as we did before, but we haven't made any progress, and it's nearly noon. Look at little Ling Sunny." The Chinese boy, dressed in plain, everyday clothes, looked like a drab moth as he emerged from the side door of the house where he worked. He approached the dog, holding out a piece of cake in one small brown hand, but Max, with his gloomy eyes, showed no sign of recognition. He sidestepped the child, stumbling in weakness until he managed to steady himself. Ling Sunny stood frozen, his hand dropping to his side, the piece of cake tumbling onto the pavement. "Go ring the bell, Max, and ask for Mr. Orbit," McCarty instructed. "I'll be with you shortly. If Wei Anya takes you to him, tell him you'll wait for me. I have more to ask." Marcus complied, but when Wei Anya appeared and he relayed his request, the man shook his head. "Mr. Orbit is not at home. He has gone down to the wharf with Sir Victor, whose ship departs at noon." "Then I'll wait for him," Marcus declared resolutely. "My friend McCarty will join me shortly. When Mr. Orbit returns, please let him know the 2 of us are here." Wei Anya escorted him to the library, and with a bow left him there. Marcus settled into a chair, ruefully feeling the pipe tucked away in his pocket. What McCarty was up to, Marcus couldn't begin to guess, and there was no telling when Orbit might come back to find him standing there with nothing in his mind, and hesitant to speak for fear of ruining the whole affair. Had Tai just been joking when he told the inspector he'd know by noon whether his theory was true or not? He hadn't learned anything substantial since then, just collecting a bunch of details that didn't really matter. Why on earth was he lingering outside, playing with the dog? Time dragged on. 20 minutes slipped by on the old grandfather clock in the corner, and still no sign of McCarty. Finally, Marcus stood up and quietly made his way down the hall to the card room, easing open the side door that led to the courtyard. There stood McCarty, chatting and laughing with the young Chinese boy as if he had no worries at all. Marcus took a cautious step forward, but just then McCarty turned to give Ling Sunny a friendly pat on the shoulder and started towards the back of the house. Marcus quickly backed away, not wanting to be discovered. What could Tai possibly have to discuss with the boy? Marcus knew him too well to fall for that carefree act, and he wouldn't waste any time at this crucial moment. Was it possible that someone from Orbit's household had given Griffith his fatal dose, and poor Isolde that breath of poisoned air? Was the boy Nathan perhaps hiding in some secret nook of Chinatown or the French Quarter? He barely had time to ponder further, for the front door swung open, and then he heard Orbit's voice, raised in a sing-song tone of Chinese. Little Ling Sunny responded, and soon the master of the house stepped inside. "Good morning, Riordan. Where is McCarty? Ling Sunny says you both wanted to see me. What can I do for you?" For a terrified moment, Marcus found his tongue stuck to the roof of his mouth, but then a sudden thought struck him. Tai has something he wants to ask you, Mr. Orbit, but he was stopped outside. He'll be in shortly. I needed to discuss that chloroform incident from the other night. You woke up feeling ill and nothing seemed disturbed, but there was the bottle and the towel with the side door open downstairs. Did you happen to notice anything else?" "Only that there were two of them," Orbit replied thoughtfully. "I forgot to mention it to the inspector. One had big, chubby hands that were a bit soft, while the other had thin, strong hands with a wiry grip and a broken finger on the left hand." "You don't say," Marcus exclaimed, and his own left hand instinctively searched his coat pocket as if seeking refuge there. Confused, he let it drop back to his side. "And how do you know that? The inspector said you had no time to react before they put the towel over your face." "They left their marks," Orbit laughed. "The one with the big hands raised my windows higher, and he must have been the one who actually drugged me. The one with the broken finger was anxious, and during that whole ordeal, he gripped the post at the foot of my bed so tight that the impression was clearly left in the smooth finish of the wood. The prints couldn't have been made by anyone in the household who came in response to my ring, because Wei Anya has very long and slender hands, Clara's are as thin as claws, and Andre's are fat but small. Ling Sunny didn't wake up, and I wouldn't allow Sir Victor or his man to be disturbed." "Maybe there were more than two of them," Marcus suggested cautiously. "Was there nothing else besides those fingerprints?" "The Bureau doesn't place as much weight on that kind of evidence anymore, especially with the advancements in science and all." "Advancements in science?" Orbit raised an eyebrow. "Are you referring to the crime-solving machines that were brought over from some of the European cities? That was years ago." "No, sir." Marcus recalled more than one encounter he'd had with those automatic devices while working alongside McCarty in the past. "This isn't a simple matter of testing your breathing, your pulse, your sweat, or even how fast you can think when a lie presents itself. It's the crime itself that reveals the character of the person who committed it and the kind of background they come from. I'm certain that soon they'll be able to determine a person's race, religion, and political views from the angle of a knife or the path of a bullet. It's astounding anyone was ever executed back in the day." "Mr. Orbit," McCarty suddenly appeared at the doorway. "Apologies for keeping you waiting. Has Sir Victor de Veru left?" "He set sail less than an hour ago." Orbit studied him curiously. "Your associate mentioned you wished to speak to me." "About Griffith. He hasn't been looking well lately. Do you know if he's been taking any medicine?" "Honestly, I couldn't say," Orbit shrugged. "I never thought to ask him." "Well then," McCarty seemed to drift into his thoughts for a moment. "Who in the household drinks milk?" "Milk," Orbit smiled. "Maybe Ling Sunny, but you'd have to check with him. The only one I know who really likes it is Vite, the monkey. It's one of his staple foods." As if called by the sound of his name, a small brownish-grey creature skittered over the threshold, paused briefly, and then leaped into the air, landing deftly on Orbit's shoulder, where he began chattering cheekily at the visitors. "Quiet, Vite, mind your manners," his owner gently stroked him. "Why do you ask about the milk, McCarty?" "It's nothing important, sir." The medical examiner was stating that the Tunis bean powder could only be dissolved in medicine or milk. Orbit felt a flicker of impatience. "Ully, these minor details aren't important right now. I'm eager to unravel the mystery surrounding Griffith's death. Nothing can bring him back or save that poor girl who died so strangely in my home, but there's Nathan Ellison. It's now the 4th day since his inexplicable disappearance, and his father tells me no one has tried to negotiate a ransom. If the boy isn't dead from some accident, he might be in terrible danger. He's frail. He wouldn't survive long under harsh conditions or deprivation." Orbit paused, then continued. "I'm not sure if this suggestion will lead anywhere, but has his home been searched thoroughly? It's a sprawling, old house with countless storerooms and closets upstairs. I've remembered them since I was a child. Nathan is a solitary, thoughtful little boy who likes to find quiet places. Isn't it possible he went up to the attic and either locked himself in or got trapped there by someone who didn't realize he was there? If he couldn't get out, he might have panicked and fainted. The possibilities are too dreadful to contemplate." "No, that's unlikely. Every corner of the house has been searched multiple times. but it's possible he had an accident elsewhere, and his body hasn't been found yet. The inspector mentioned something along those lines earlier. The boy could have been dead even before Camden noticed he was missing. Do you remember the tutor coming by to inquire about him while we were speaking to you? The coal men were just about to deliver your supply. Yes, yes, Orbit nodded quickly, his frustration with McCarty's rambling clear in his voice. What a frustrating time for this to happen, especially just before my guests arrive. I had placed the order days ago, but dwelling on Nathan isn't going to help. I doubt the Goddards are any less anxious than I am for some real progress with this investigation. Well, the inspector will be here shortly if you're home, McCarty motioned to Marcus with a nod of his head. He has something on his mind he wants to discuss with you, and maybe you can assist him. We haven't made much progress, that's for sure. This is the toughest case the department has ever dealt with. There was a hint of frustration in his voice, and Orbit responded with understanding. I'm sure you're doing everything you can, and I'll be glad to see the inspector or either of you whenever you need me. He pressed the bell, and as Wei Anya opened the door, he added, Has the medical examiner reached any conclusions about the girl's death? If it was indeed gas, it's strange that its nature can't be determined. But I admit, I know very little about chemistry. He paused. I'll wait to hear from the inspector. I don't understand you this morning, Marcus complained as the door to Orbit's house closed behind them. While I was waiting, I saw you joking with the little girl in the side yard, and then you went to the back, and Orbit came in, and I had to fill him in. Why did we even go there in the first place? You had hardly anything to ask him, and you got even less. Are you just stalling for time? There will be no more stalling, Max. McCarty's tone was more urgent now. I didn't get much from Orbit, but we'll head to Ellison now. I need to use his telephone. Why didn't you use Orbit? Marcus questioned, then realization dawned. You plan to call the inspector, and there are people in that house back there. Ty, for the love of everything holy, have you discovered something? Have you finally figured it out? Max, the dog lying in a patch of sunlight that squeezed through the narrow space between the houses, lifted his head at the excited tone of Marcus. McCarty looked at him thoughtfully. It wasn't me who figured anything out, Max, and it's just a guess at this point, but it should have occurred to me by now, he replied. We'll have a little while to wait, and I'd appreciate it if you could keep Ellison and Camden occupied and keep an eye on them while I make a phone call. I don't want either of them overhearing. So it's one of them as well as someone in Orbit's house, Marcus exclaimed in disbelief. Ty, what kind of twisted scheme is this? You said last night that it was too disturbing to discuss. It's worse, McCarty cut in sharply. Let's wait and see what unfolds. Winch, the butler, looking more frail and worn than ever, led them into the drawing-room where Ellison soon appeared, followed by Camden. Over the past few days, the stout little man had undergone a noticeable change. His eyes were dim, and the flesh of his face hung loosely as though deflated, while his voice carried the quivering tone of someone much older. Do you have news for us, McCarty? Have you heard anything about Nathan? I think I know where he might be soon, Mr. Ellison, McCarty replied calmly. But I need to ask you to hold on until the inspector arrives. I'll have to phone him. Is it all right if I use the one in your smoking room? I want to make sure it's private because this is confidential. He glanced at Camden. Thanks, I know the way. Waiting only for Ellison's nod, he shot a quick warning look at Marcus before quickly leaving the room. Marcus searched his mind for a safe subject to discuss, but he was relieved of the burden. What's going on, Riordan? For heaven's sake, what does McCarty mean? Ellison turned to him, anxiety etched across his face. I have no idea, Marcus replied, truthfully enough. He's been working on something for the last day or two while I was doing other tasks, but I expect things will be progressing now. Haven't you heard anything yourself? Nothing, Ellison pressed a trembling hand to his forehead. I'm telling you, Riordan, we can't take much more of this. If my boy were in his grave, at least we would know and somehow learn to cope, but this uncertainty is driving us mad. If we don't find out the truth soon, I fear I'll lose my wife too. We will find out. Marcus spoke with firm confidence. Ty is not the kind of person to start something he can't finish, and I've worked too many cases with him to not recognize the signs. If he says they'll find the boy soon, he means it. But perhaps he'll be ill or something, which is worrying, you see, especially being away from home. Words failed him, for he sensed in the ominous calmness of McCarty's voice a hint of trouble lurking ahead. He stumbled over his thoughts in a heartfelt attempt to soften the blow. His moment of uncertainty was interrupted by McCarty's sudden reappearance in the doorway. "Max, go out and call Yast in. The inspector has instructions for him." The excitement in his voice was unmistakable. "And don't announce to the whole block what you're doing." "I don't know myself," Marcus snapped back, though he was already preparing to comply. "Should I take his place?" "Now you're talking," McCarty nodded in approval. "He'll have a message for you when he comes out, and it'll be fine to follow his instructions. The other night in my rooms, when we were getting ready to visit a couple of places, I gave you something to carry. Did you think to bring it with you now?" The revolver. Marcus felt a jolt of realization and instinctively reached for his hip pocket as he nodded. "Good. You'll know what to do with it after you've spoken to Yast." "Send him in." Marcus left and found the patrolman from headquarters idly pacing the sidewalk, delivering the message. He then began to walk back and forth, lost in a swirl of confusion. Things were definitely changing. He couldn't understand what was going through McCarty's mind, but there was a heavy feeling in the air of the sunlit, nearly deserted block, like the eerie quiet before a storm. The elder Renee returned, and the housemaid from Mrs. Thorne, who had taken care of little Maud right after Wednesday's tragedy, went out on an errand and returned just as Yast was about to leave the Ellison house. By the time he reached Marcus, the earlier look of indifference was gone. "Who's left them all?" he asked sharply. "Just a hired girl from Mrs. Thorne, and she's back now," Marcus replied. "What's going on? Ty said you tell me what to do and asked if I had a gun. I do." "Then take the east gate," Yast instructed, pointing. "Open it for anyone coming in, but don't let anyone out. Do whatever it takes. Understand?" "That's the clearest order I've heard all day," Marcus declared. "I won't have to shoot anyone, but no one is getting past me. What in the world is happening?" "All I know is that the inspector is on his way as fast as the chief's car can manage, and he's bringing a small army with him. It looks like this might be the climax, Riordan. Hey, there goes the Thorne butler. I'll have to intercept him because I'm going to take the west gate myself. Someone needs to get in your way." Marcus rushed to the gate leading to the avenue, and with a sense of formality, he allowed an open touring car to enter. Inside sat a young lady, so stunningly beautiful that he stared at her in respectful awe until she vanished into the Webster house. Was that the old gentleman's niece? His attention snapped back to his duties when the chauffeur turned around and drove straight toward him again, stopping just a few feet away. "Hey, open the gate." "Not happening," Marcus shot back decisively. "I've got orders from police headquarters. Those who get in, stay in." "Hey, you greenhorn. I'm Mr. Webster's chauffeur, if that means anything to you, and I'm in a hurry." "Then you're going to be disappointed." With a reluctance that would have meant instant trouble if he were up against a real threat, Marcus pulled out his revolver. "It wouldn't matter if you drove the chariot of the angel Gabriel. You won't get through that gate." A lengthy argument ensued, interrupted only by the appearance of young Mr. Brinsley Renee on the avenue side of the barrier. He hesitated, turning slightly pale at the sight of Marcus's imposing weapon. Marcus called out sharply, "Go around to the other gate if you want in. This guy will leave if you open this one. Police orders." "Really?" Brinsley Renee stared through his thick-rimmed glasses. "This is absurd. What has the man done, officer?" Marcus visibly puffed up at being addressed. "Nothing yet," he admitted. "He won't either unless he's looking to get himself hurt." "Is he mad?" Young Renee turned to the chauffeur, who, sensing a potential ally, began to explain his grievances. The argument became a triangular affair, even as the sign of the Sloanes remained cautiously at the neutral ground beyond the gate. It finally came to an end when a subdued commotion arose at the other gate. Marcus turned to see the inspector slowly pull in with several familiar officials from the department. His car was followed by a larger vehicle packed with burly men wielding long-handled shovels. Marcus gasped in surprise, and Brinsley Renee hurriedly let himself in with his key, while the Websters' chauffeur no longer showed any desire to leave. Martin suddenly appeared out of nowhere and addressed the astonished deputy. "Get going, Riordan. Ty needs you. I'll take over your post." Marcus wasted no time. He took off at a hurried jog, unconsciously waving his revolver as he went, while Ellison, Camden, and McCarty emerged from the house to meet him. In a daze, he noticed how the tutor supported his employer with an almost familial concern, the older man leaning heavily against him, pale but composed. The men with shovels were jumping out of the second car, and he noticed they were also carrying large, dirty baskets. He looked over at McCarty with curiosity as the inspector rushed forward. "All set, Ty. The teams are stationed all around the walls. What needs to be done?" "First, open that coal chute," McCarty commanded, pointing to the square iron plate that looked like a trapdoor in the center of the side court, where Max was still hovering. "Then send your men down into Orbit's cellar to dig like mad. There's 30 tons to move, and the 10 of them have an hour to get it done. Mr. Ellison is offering $1,000 to whoever pulls out the last shovelful. Get to work." Way Anya appeared at the front door of the Orbit house, while Clara stood at the side entrance. Andre was peeping through the kitchen window. Suddenly, the houseman was pushed aside, and Orbit stepped out. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "We're going to move your coal, Mr. Orbit. The coal that was put in right when Nathan Ellison disappeared," McCarty replied. He turned quickly to the group that was lifting the cover of the chute. As it rose and then fell back, ringing against the pavement, a long, drawn-out howl pierced the air. Max, tense and quivering, was staring down into the opening, and McCarty gestured toward him. "It was him, not me, who had the hunch first, Inspector. It was the lad's friend here, Max.